St. Martin's Medical Center, one of the top hospitals in the UK. The sound of footsteps echoed throughout the hallway, blending with the murmurs of doctors and nurses rushing past. A place of healing, a place of lives hanging in the balance, where every decision made could be the difference between life and death. Yet, amidst all this life or death urgency, there was a quiet tension simmering just below the surface. Stay with us to see what unfolds next. Dr. Maya Johnson had always known that working in a high-powered, prestigious hospital like St. Martin's would be no easy feat. A senior consultant in the surgery department, Maya was one of the few black doctors at this level, a fact she rarely mentioned, but it didn't go unnoticed. Her credentials spoke for themselves, and BEBs from one of the most respected universities, years of rigorous training, and countless surgeries that had saved lives that had been written off by others, but not by her. Yet, despite her impressive resume, Maya had always felt like an outsider. Every day was a battle for recognition, not just for her skills, but for the very right to be seen as equal in the eyes of her colleagues. Her white counterparts, many of whom had come from old money, private schools, and prestigious family backgrounds, had little interest in the struggles of someone like her. It wasn't just the microaggressions that made her job harder. It was the unspoken assumption that she didn't belong in such a position, that she didn't belong among them. She pulled the collar of her scrubs higher, trying to block out the low murmur of the nursing station as she walked past. She had learned long ago not to let the whispers and sideways glances bother her. She had come here to do a job, not to prove anything to anyone, but it still weighed on her. Every patient she treated, every surgery she performed, every time she stepped into that operating room, it was a test not just of her skill, but of her very right to be there. Today, however, Maya's attention was fixed solely on her work. She was about to enter one of the most critical surgeries of her career. A 30-year-old lady who had suffered a major heart attack and was being rushed into the OR for emergency surgery. It would require her utmost precision, quick thinking, and unshakable focus. Her colleagues in the surgery room were all white, most of them significantly older than her, with years of experience that they were more than willing to boast about. But Maya wasn't worried. She had done this before, not with this exact patient, but with countless others. She was prepared. "Dr. Johnson, we're ready for you," a nurse called out as she walked into the operating room. Maya nodded, taking her place at the head of the table, where the patient's lifeless body lay. As she scrubbed in, she could hear the whispers of the other surgeons behind her. They weren't speaking about the case. No, it was something else. Maya had long grown used to their subtle dismissals. The way they would avoid making eye contact, the way they'd question her methods even when they knew she was right. One surgeon, in particular Dr. Thomas Layton, was always the loudest. He had been at St. Martin's longer than Maya had been alive, and he made it a point to remind her of that every chance he got. "You sure about this incision, Dr. Johnson?" "I would have gone a bit lower, but if that's what you're thinking," Dr. Layton's voice trailed off with that familiar air of condescension. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't have to. She had been here before, had faced worse than this, and she wasn't about to let him throw her off course now. The incision was precise, exactly where it needed to be. "I've got it covered, Dr. Layton," Maya replied coolly, her eyes scanning the sterile instruments laid out before her. "We proceed as planned." The room went silent as Maya took the lead in the surgery, every movement deliberate and practiced. She was a surgeon first, and in this moment, her skin color didn't matter, at least it shouldn't have. She was fully aware, however, that she was often held to a different standard, especially by her colleagues. The next few hours would prove whether her medical expertise would be recognized or dismissed. As the surgery continued, Maya's mind focused solely on the patient. Every movement of her hands, every decision she made, was with the goal of saving this lady's life. She could feel the pressure of the moment, the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. But there was something more, a quiet, simmering anger. An anger that had been building for years, ever since she had stepped into this field, and been forced to prove herself every step of the way. For now, she pushed that anger aside, focusing only on what was before her, a life in her hands, her patient's life. The sterile hum of the operating room was punctuated only by the occasional beeping of monitors and the steady rhythm of Maya's breathing. The pressure was mounting. Her hands, steady despite the intensity, moved with precision as she navigated through the surgery. Dr. Layton hovered near her, his eyes scanning her every move like a hawk. She could feel the weight of his gaze. She was used to it by now, but today it felt heavier than ever. The heart attack patient was deteriorating faster than expected. His blood pressure was dropping rapidly, and his heart was struggling to keep a steady rhythm. Maya knew exactly what needed to be done, a specific procedure to stabilize his vitals before they could proceed with the main surgery. It was a standard maneuver, one she had done countless times before. But as she reached for a different tool, Dr. Layton spoke up. "Dr. Johnson," he said, his tone laced with skepticism, "are you sure about that? I would suggest we try a different approach, maybe recheck the patient's response to the other meds first." Maya's hands paused mid-movement, though her composure remained intact. She knew what was happening. Dr. Layton had done this before, questioning her authority, undermining her confidence in front of the team. She had seen it countless times, the subtle jabs, the dismissive tones, the undermining of her knowledge. But today, this surgery was hers. This was her moment. "I've already reviewed the meds," Maya replied calmly, her eyes never leaving the patient's vitals. "This is the next step to stabilize him." A few of the younger residents glanced at each other, uncomfortable with the tension hanging in the air. Maya could feel the silent judgment from the rest of the team. Dr. Layton, however, wasn't done. He leaned in closer, his voice lowered but pointed. "You've only been a consultant for a year, Maya," he said, making sure the others heard him. "Maybe you should let someone with a bit more experience take the lead here." The words stung more than she cared to admit. Maya's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. She had spent years climbing the ladder, enduring worse than this. Every decision she had made up until now had been calculated, and every surgical success she had led had been the result of her diligence and training. Yet here he was questioning her judgment, as if she were still that intern fresh out of medical school. Maya's heart raced, but she didn't show it. The patient's life was still at risk, and if she allowed herself to be distracted by this microaggression, he would suffer. She turned to the nurse next to her, her voice steady. "Prepare the tool," she said, before adding, "Dr. Layton, you're welcome to supervise, but I'm taking the lead on this." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Dr. Layton's lips pressed into a thin line, his disapproval palpable. Yet he said nothing more. The tension in the room was thick, suffocating. Maya felt the eyes of her colleagues on her, some full of judgment, others full of silent support, but she couldn't afford to dwell on that. She had to focus. As she proceeded with the procedure, a sense of quiet determination washed over her. She could feel the weight of their disbelief on her shoulders, but she wasn't going to let it break her. This was her moment, and she would prove herself not just to them, but to herself. Minutes passed like hours. The surgical team moved in practiced unison, responding to her every command. The patient's vitals began to stabilize. Slowly, the pressure in the operating room began to lift, and the oppressive air of doubt was replaced with a tentative sense of calm. Maya's plan was working. Then, just as they were about to proceed with the next step, disaster struck. The patient's blood pressure suddenly dropped again, and her heart rate became erratic. The room fell into a panic. For a split second, Dr. Layton tried to take control, but it was too late. Maya had already seen the signs earlier, and she knew exactly what to do. She didn't hesitate. "Get me the defibrillator," she ordered. Her voice was calm, but it carried with it the authority of someone who had been in this position too many times to second-guess herself. The staff scrambled to follow her lead, moving quickly under her direction. Maya's hands were steady as she applied the electrodes, and with a single, precise shock, the patient's heart stilled and then, miraculously, began to beat again. The silence in the room was deafening. It wasn't until the monitor beeped steadily, confirming the patient's survival, that anyone dared to speak. Dr. Layton stepped back, his face pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Maya didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her work had spoken for itself. The younger residents, the ones who had been watching from the sidelines, exchanged looks of quiet admiration. Maya could feel their gaze now, and it was different. They no longer saw her as the underdog, they saw her as a leader. The room was quieter now, but the tension had not fully dissipated. The hum of the machines, the clatter of medical tools, and the shuffle of feet felt distant as Maya removed her gloves, each pull making the weight of the moment heavier. She stood at the foot of the operating table, her focus still sharp, despite the adrenaline that was beginning to wear off. The patient was stable for now, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't over. Maya didn't need to look at Dr. Layton to know he was disappointed. She had seen it in his eyes before, the subtle shift from condescension to begrudging acceptance. The kind of look that said, "You did well, but you still don't belong." She exhaled, willing the knot in her stomach to loosen. This wasn't about him. It was never about him. But the weight of the years was heavy. It wasn't just today that had tested her resolve. Every glance, every whispered word, every doubt cast her way over the years they had built up. And as much as she tried to bury it, there was always that nagging question, am I enough? As Maya stepped out of the operating room, she was met by one of the younger residents, Dr. Rachel Turner. She was just finishing her rounds and had witnessed the entire ordeal from the sidelines. "Dr. Johnson," Rachel said, her voice filled with quiet admiration, "that was incredible. You saved her life. I've never seen anything like it. You were amazing." Maya gave her a small smile, feeling the weight in her chest lighten just a fraction. "Thank you, Rachel. But we're not done yet. Let's get this patient into recovery and monitor his vitals closely." Rachel nodded, stepping aside to let Maya pass. But before she could leave, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was another resident, Dr. James Wright, someone who had always been neutral, neither dismissive nor overly supportive. "You handled that like a pro, Dr. Johnson," he said quietly. "Just don't let them get to you. You've earned that spot, and today you proved it. Don't let them make you question your worth." Maya's throat tightened at his words. She forced herself to smile. "Thanks, James." As she walked down the sterile corridor, her thoughts began to churn. Dr. Wright's words echoed in her mind, but they didn't stop the flood of frustration that followed. She had fought for years to be seen as equal, to prove that her abilities weren't determined by the color of her skin or her gender. But after all the surgeries, the late nights, the patients she had saved, the whispered dismissal still lingered. Is this enough? The question gnawed at her. Back in the surgeon's lounge, Dr. Layton and the senior surgeons gathered around the coffee machine, their murmurs rising in volume. Maya could hear snippets of their conversation, though they tried to keep it quiet. "I still can't believe she made the call," one of them muttered. "I thought she was going to lose him there. It's not like we haven't been doing this for years." "Exactly," Dr. Layton added, shaking his head. "But I guess she had her moment, didn't she? Don't get me wrong, she did well, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. One successful surgery doesn't make you a leader." Maya's hand clenched around the coffee cup she had just poured. She could feel her heart rate pick up. That familiar fire began to burn within her, the fire that had kept her going for so long. She took a deep breath, placing the cup down on the counter without a word. She wasn't going to be angry. Anger wouldn't change anything. But the injustice, the inequality, it was harder to ignore today. In the background, she heard one of the residents speaking to Dr. Layton. "Maybe it's time we start trusting her a little more, Dr. Layton. You saw what happened today. She saved that patient." The words were small, but they were enough to crack open the dam in Maya's heart. She could feel the stirrings of change. This wasn't just a victory in the OR, it was a chance to make her mark. But she knew better than anyone that it wouldn't come easily. No matter how much she proved herself, there would always be someone there to remind her that she was the underdog. Maya stood up straighter, walking toward the door with a purpose. She wasn't about to let a few doubters dictate her career. especially not after everything she had fought for. She wasn't just going to save lives in the OR, she was going to change the system, one patient at a time. And maybe, just maybe, the hospital would eventually see her for the force that she truly was. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She continued to monitor her patient, checking in with the team to make sure everything was running smoothly. Her thoughts, however, were elsewhere. She had already begun planning her next move. This was no longer just about being the best surgeon. This was about fighting for the respect and equality that she had long deserved. She was going to prove that she wasn't just there because she had earned it. She was going to make sure everyone else knew it too. The hum of the hospital's ventilators and the low murmur of busy footsteps in the corridor faded away as Maya stood in front of her patient's recovery bed, staring at the monitor. The numbers flickered, a delicate balance between life and death. Everything had seemed to be going well. The procedure was a success, but there was a lingering doubt something wasn't quite right. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced. The patient's vitals were beginning to drop again. Slowly at first, then more rapidly. Her instincts kicked in immediately. She looked over the readings and immediately saw the signs. The patient's heart, though stable moments before, was failing to pump properly. Her oxygen levels were dropping. There was no time for hesitation. "Get me the defibrillator now," Maya's voice was sharp, cutting through the room. Her fingers flew across the console, recalculating the dosage for the shock needed to save her. Her team was already moving, but there was a tension in the room. This wasn't just a medical emergency, it was her moment to show her worth, to prove that she deserved to be here, that she belonged among them. Dr. Layton, standing across the room with his arms folded, shot her a questioning glance. He was no longer in charge. This was Maya's show now. "We need to stabilize him before we can do anything else," Maya said, her voice calm but firm. "I'll take full responsibility." Dr. Layton opened his mouth to protest, but Maya didn't give him the chance. She had been in these situations before, and today she wasn't going to let anyone stand in her way. The nurse quickly handed her the defibrillator paddles. Maya's fingers grasped them, feeling the weight of the responsibility. This was no longer just about a procedure, it was about trust. Trust in herself, trust in her training, trust in her ability to save a life. She looked down at the patient, her eyes locking on her fragile form. A young lady, no more than 30, her life hanging by a thread. She had a family, a husband, kids. She could already see the headlines in her mind: "Doctor fails to save patient in critical condition." But it wouldn't be that way. Not today. Not on her watch. Her voice broke through the tension in the room. Clear. The team stepped back. She pressed the paddles against her chest, feeling the electric shock pulse through her hands, hoping it would work. The first shock was met with a faint flicker of the heart monitor, but it wasn't enough. The patient's heart wavered but didn't restart. Maya's breath hitched in her chest, but she didn't give up. She couldn't. She was the only one in the room who could see the bigger picture. She wasn't going to let fear or doubt cloud her judgment. She had been underestimated her whole career, but that only made her more determined to prove herself. "Again," she said, her voice steady as she prepared for another shock. This time, as she pressed the paddles to the patient's chest, the defibrillator sent a shock that seemed to echo through the entire room. Time seemed to slow. Maya's eyes stayed fixed on the monitor, watching intently for any change. The seconds stretched out like an eternity. Then it happened. The monitor beeped once, then twice, then steadily. The heart rate began to stabilize. The patient's chest rose and fell with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Maya let out the breath she had been holding. She stood still for a moment, eyes locked on the patient's now stabilized form, before turning to her team. "She's stable," she said, her voice low but filled with a quiet triumph. "Keep monitoring him closely. I'll be back in an hour." There was a brief moment of silence, and then Dr. Layton, who had remained quiet throughout the entire procedure, spoke. I didn't think it would work," he muttered, his voice softer than usual. Maya turned to face him. His expression was unreadable, but she caught the flicker of respect in his eyes. "Dr. Layton," Maya said, her voice steady, "it's not about thinking it will work. It's about knowing it will." For a moment there was no response. Dr. Layton just nodded slowly, as though he were processing something new. The air in the room shifted. The tension that had built up earlier, the doubts, the dismissive glances, they all began to melt away. Maya's heart was still pounding in her chest, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from something else, a deep, quiet satisfaction. She had done what no one thought she could. As Maya stepped out of the operating room, the reality of what had just transpired began to sink in. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but she was also vindicated. The whispers from her colleagues, the skepticism, the doubt, they didn't matter anymore. She had saved a life in a way that no one else could. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The patient was moved to the ICU, and Maya remained on her feet, checking in with other cases, making sure everything ran smoothly. As she stood outside her office later that afternoon, she noticed Dr. Rachel Turner approaching. The young resident had been there throughout the entire ordeal. She was waiting outside the door, obviously trying to find the right words. "Dr. Johnson," Rachel began, her voice hesitant, "I just wanted to say you were incredible today. I've never seen anything like it." Maya smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Thank you, Rachel, but we still have work to do." Rachel looked around before speaking again, lowering her voice as though making sure no one else was listening. "I just wanted to say that wasn't just saving a life. You saved all of us today. You saved all of us from thinking we're only good when we're recognized by people who don't see us." Maya blinked, surprised by the honesty in Rachel's voice. She hadn't expected that. "We see you, Dr. Johnson. We see what you did today." Maya's heart fluttered for a moment, and she looked into Rachel's eyes. There was something there, something more than admiration. There was understanding. For the first time, Maya didn't feel like the underdog. She felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The days following the successful surgery passed in a whirlwind of praise and acknowledgement. Maya's name was on the lips of every staff member at St. Martin's. For the first time, the whispers in the corridors weren't about her being an outsider or not belonging. They were about her expertise, her skill, and the way she had taken charge in the most critical moment. She had proven herself in the most public way possible, and no one could deny her impact. But the respect Maya received wasn't just in the form of praise from her peers. It was tangible. A week after the surgery, Dr. Layton called her into his office. He didn't say much at first, but as Maya sat down, she noticed a slight change in his demeanor. His usually condescending attitude was gone, replaced with something different, something Maya had never expected to see from him. "I've been thinking about what happened in the OR," Dr. Layton said, his voice quieter than usual. "And I can't deny it. You saved that patient. You did something none of us could have done." Maya nodded, trying to keep her emotions in check. This wasn't just about the praise. It was about what came next. "I've recommended you for a new role," Dr. Layton continued. "The position of Chief of Surgery is open, and you're the one I believe is best suited for it." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Chief of Surgery. It was a role she had never imagined being offered, especially not after everything she'd endured to get to this point. She had fought for this her entire career, and now it was within her reach. "I'm honored," she said softly, but inside she could feel the weight of her hard work paying off. All those years of doubt, those moments of feeling less than, had brought her to this moment. She had earned it, not through favors or handouts, but through sheer determination and skill. Dr. Layton looked at her, and for the first time there was genuine respect in his eyes. "You've earned this, Maya. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise." Maya left his office feeling a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. She had made it. She had risen through the ranks, defied the odds, and proved that her worth wasn't defined by her race or gender, but by her ability and her dedication. That night, as she sat at home, Maya thought back on everything that had led her here. The constant microaggressions, the looks of doubt, the feeling of always having to prove herself. She remembered the doubts she'd had about whether it was worth it, whether she'd ever be seen as equal, whether anyone would ever look at her and see her for the doctor she was, not the color of her skin. But now it is different. She had faced it all, and in the end she had proven herself. And as she reflected, Maya realized that this wasn't just about her. It was about all the people who had come before her and all those who would come after her. She had broken through the glass ceiling, but the work was far from over. The battle for equality, for recognition, was ongoing, and it was her responsibility to ensure that others didn't have to fight the same battles she had. She wasn't just a doctor, she was a leader, and now she had the platform to make a difference not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt overlooked or underestimated. The story of Dr. Maya Johnson isn't just a tale of personal triumph. It's a powerful reminder that success isn't handed to you. You have to fight for it not just with your skills, but with your heart, your determination, and your unwavering belief that you deserve a seat at the table. No matter the obstacles, no matter how many times you're knocked down or made to feel small, remember this: your worth is not defined by others' perceptions of you. You define your own value. Maya's journey shows us that no matter how tough the fight, the right time will come when you'll rise above it all and prove that you're more than capable. If you've ever felt like an underdog, like no one believed in you or saw your potential, know that you are not alone. You have the power to make your mark, to break down barriers, and to create a future where your worth is recognized. If you found Maya's story inspiring, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with more stories of perseverance, strength, and overcoming adversity. Like this video to show your support for those who are breaking barriers in their fields. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that they too can rise above the challenges they face. And drop a comment below to let us know what part of Dr. Maya Johnson's journey resonated with you the most.